I'm Sarah Mitchell, 29 years old, and I thought my brother's promotion to senior vice president at Goldman Hartwell was going to be the moment our family finally acknowledged that success runs in both directions. I was wrong. When Michael looked me straight in the eye at his celebration dinner and said those words I'll never forget, "Sorry, Sarah, this is invite only," little did he know that what happened next would change not just our relationship but his entire career trajectory. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up as the younger sister of Michael Mitchell meant living in a shadow that seemed to grow longer with each passing year. Our parents, Jennifer and Robert Mitchell, raised us in an affluent suburb of Denver, where appearances mattered more than authenticity and achievement was measured in titles, not impact. Dad worked as a corporate attorney for one of the city's most prestigious firms, while Mom dedicated herself to charity work and maintaining the perfect household that served as a backdrop for Dad's networking dinners. From the outside, we looked like the ideal American success story. Two intelligent children, comfortable lifestyle, parents who emphasized education and hard work. But beneath that polished surface lay a dynamic that would shape both of our futures in ways I couldn't have anticipated at the time. Michael was 3 years older than me, and from the moment he could walk, he commanded attention in ways that seemed effortless. When he brought home report cards with B's and C's, there were celebrations and promises of rewards. When I consistently earned straight A's, it was met with a simple nod and the expectation that I would continue performing at that level. This pattern became so ingrained in our family structure that I began to think it was normal. During high school, while I spent countless hours studying, participating in debate team, volunteering at the local hospital, and working part-time at a bookstore to save for college, Michael coasted through his classes, played varsity football, and spent weekends at parties. Yet when college application season arrived, Dad spent hours helping Michael craft his essays and personally called his alumni connections to discuss Michael's potential. My applications were met with a cursory review and the assumption that I would figure things out on my own. I did figure it out. I earned a full academic scholarship to Northwestern University, where I double majored in economics and political science, graduated summa cum laude, and was accepted to Harvard Business School before I turned 22. Michael, meanwhile, attended a state university on Dad's dime, majored in communications, graduated with a 2.8 GPA, and spent the summer after college backpacking through Europe while I was working 80-hour weeks as a research analyst at a boutique consulting firm in Chicago. The disparity in our achievements should have been obvious, but in the Mitchell family hierarchy, Michael's charm and social connections always seemed to matter more than my academic accomplishments or professional competence. When I landed my first job at McKinsey & Company straight out of business school, Dad's response was to ask when I planned to start thinking about marriage and children. When Michael got hired as a junior associate at Goldman Hartwell, through a family friend's connection, despite having no relevant experience or impressive credentials, there was champagne and dinner at the country club. This double standard became the defining characteristic of our family dynamics. Michael's minimal efforts were celebrated while my exceptional achievements were treated as inevitable. I began to understand that in my parents' eyes, his success reflected well on the family's social standing, while mine was seen as a personal pursuit that didn't contribute to their carefully cultivated image. At McKinsey, I threw myself into my work with the same intensity that had carried me through school. I specialized in organizational restructuring and quickly became known for my ability to identify inefficiencies and implement solutions that saved clients millions of dollars. Within 2 years, I was promoted to senior associate, and by my 4th year, I was leading projects that typically went to consultants with twice my experience. My work took me across the country and internationally. I restructured supply chains for Fortune 500 companies, advised startups on scaling strategies, and helped failing businesses turn around their operations. The work was demanding, often requiring 12-hour days and weekend travel, but it was intellectually stimulating and professionally rewarding in ways that went beyond monetary compensation. Meanwhile, Michael was making his way up the corporate ladder at Goldman Hartwell, a mid-sized investment firm that specialized in wealth management for high-net-worth individuals. His progression seemed steady but unremarkable. He started in client services, moved to junior wealth advisor, then to wealth advisor, and after 6 years, was promoted to senior wealth advisor. Each promotion was celebrated by our parents, as if he had discovered a cure for cancer. I attended these celebration dinners, watched my parents beam with pride, and listened to Dad's long toasts about Michael's potential and bright future. The irony wasn't lost on me that while I was advising companies on multi-million-dollar decisions, Michael's biggest achievement was convincing wealthy retirees to diversify their portfolios. Not that there was anything wrong with his work, but the disproportionate praise he received compared to my accomplishments was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. The pattern continued through our 20s. When I was featured in Forbes' 30 Under 30 Inches list for my innovative approach to supply chain optimization, the family dinner conversation quickly shifted to Michael's golf handicap and his new apartment in Lodo. When I was invited to speak at the Harvard Business School alumni conference about women in consulting, Mom asked if I had met any nice men at Harvard that might be worth reconnecting with. I began to realize that my achievements existed in a parallel universe that didn't intersect with my family's perception of success. They weren't intentionally diminishing my accomplishments, but they genuinely seemed unable to comprehend or value the type of success I was building. Michael's path was familiar, traditional, and easily understood. Mine was complex, demanding, and outside their frame of reference. Despite this frustration, I maintained a relationship with my family. I attended holiday gatherings, sent birthday cards, and made an effort to stay connected to Michael's life and career progression. There was a part of me that still hoped for recognition, for some acknowledgement that I had built something meaningful and impressive. That hope kept me engaged with family dynamics that consistently disappointed me. When I turned 28, I made the decision to leave McKinsey and start my own consulting firm. The move was risky, requiring me to leave behind a prestigious position, steady income, and clear career trajectory for the uncertainty of entrepreneurship. But I had developed expertise in organizational efficiency and a network of clients who valued my work, and I was confident I could build something significant on my own. Mitchell Strategic Consulting launched with 3 major clients, all former McKinsey accounts, that chose to follow me to my new firm. Within 6 months, I had hired 2 junior consultants and was turning down potential projects because I couldn't accommodate the demand. The business grew rapidly, and by the end of my first year, I was generating more revenue than I had ever earned as an employee. My parents' response to this entrepreneurial success was predictably lukewarm. Dad worried about the instability of self-employment and suggested I might want to consider returning to a more traditional corporate structure. Mom expressed concern about how the demanding schedule of running a business might impact my future family plans. Neither seemed to grasp the significance of building a successful company from nothing, or the level of skill and dedication required to make such a venture succeed. Michael, meanwhile, was making his own career moves at Goldman Hartwell. After 8 years with the company, he had built a solid reputation in wealth management and had developed relationships with several high-profile clients. His book of business was growing steadily, and he was being considered for promotion to senior vice president, a position that would give him significant autonomy and a substantial increase in compensation. During family dinners, Dad would pepper Michael with questions about his potential promotion, offering advice about office politics and strategic positioning. Michael would share details about his meetings with senior partners, his presentations to the executive committee, and his confidence about his chances for advancement. These conversations were engaging and animated, with Dad drawing on his own corporate experience to provide guidance, and Mom offering emotional support and encouragement. When I tried to share updates about my business growth, new client acquisitions, or strategic partnerships I was developing, the responses were polite but brief. There would be a few perfunctory questions, maybe a comment about how busy I must be, and then the conversation would shift to other topics. It wasn't malicious, but it was clear that my professional life didn't generate the same level of interest or investment from my parents. This dynamic had become so entrenched that I stopped expecting different reactions. I focused on building my business, serving my clients, and creating the kind of professional life that fulfilled me, regardless of whether my family understood or appreciated it. I had learned to find validation in my work itself, in the results I delivered for clients, and in the respect I earned from colleagues and competitors in my industry. But there was still a small part of me that hoped for change, for some moment when my family would recognize the value of what I had accomplished. That hope was what made Michael's promotion announcement so significant to me. Here was an opportunity for our family to celebrate professional achievement together, to acknowledge that both Mitchell children had found success in their respective fields. When Michael called to tell me about his promotion to senior vice president, I was genuinely excited for him. Despite our complicated family dynamics, I loved my brother and wanted him to succeed. The promotion represented a significant step forward in his career, and I knew how much it meant to him to achieve that level of recognition at Goldman Hartwell. "Sarah, you're the first person I called," he said, his voice full of excitement. "I got the promotion, Senior VP, effective next month. Can you believe it?" "Michael, that's incredible," I replied, "and I meant it. You've worked so hard for this. I'm really proud of you." We talked for 20 minutes about what the new role would entail, the increase in responsibility, and his plans for growing his client base. It was one of the most genuine conversations we'd had in months, free from the usual competition and comparison that often characterized our interactions. "Mom and Dad are planning a celebration dinner," he said as we were wrapping up the call. "Something nice to mark the occasion. I think Dad's more excited than I am, if that's possible." I laughed, picturing Dad's inevitable pride and the lengthy toast he would undoubtedly prepare. "He's been waiting for this moment as much as you have. The whole family's going to be there," Michael continued. "Aunts, uncles, cousins, you know how Mom gets about these things. She's already started planning the menu." As I listened to him describe the upcoming celebration, I felt a familiar mixture of happiness for his success and anticipation about being part of a family gathering focused on professional achievement. Maybe this would be different. Maybe this time, the conversation would naturally expand to include acknowledgement of both of our careers, both of our accomplishments. "When's the dinner?" I asked, already mentally checking my calendar to ensure I would be available. 2 weeks from Saturday. I'll send you the details once Mom finalizes everything." That was 3 weeks ago. Since then I had rearranged client meetings, turned down a speaking engagement, and cleared my schedule to make sure I could attend Michael's celebration dinner. I had even gone shopping for a new dress, something professional but celebratory, appropriate for marking a significant career milestone with family. But as the date approached, I began to notice something strange. Mom would mention details about the dinner when I called, talking about the restaurant reservation, the menu she had planned, and the guest list that seemed to be growing by the day. But I never received the formal invitation or specific details that Michael had promised to send. When I asked Mom about the time and location during a phone call earlier this week, she seemed flustered and said she would have Michael send me the information. When I texted Michael directly, his response was vague and delayed, saying he would get back to me with details soon. By Thursday of this week, with the dinner scheduled for Saturday, I still hadn't received any concrete information. I was starting to feel confused and slightly concerned that there had been some miscommunication. I decided to call Michael directly to clarify the situation. "Hey, about Saturday night," I said when he answered. "I still don't have the restaurant name or time. Mom said you were handling the details." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Saturday night, your promotion dinner," I said, feeling a knot forming in my stomach. "The family celebration you mentioned when you got the promotion." Another pause, longer this time. "Oh right, Sarah, I thought I had mentioned this. The dinner is actually pretty small, just immediate family and a few close friends. Company people, you know. It's more of a business networking thing than a family gathering." I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. Business networking. Yeah, some senior partners from the firm, a few key clients, that kind of thing. Dad thought it would be good for me to make it more professional, help cement some important relationships. The knot in my stomach tightened. "But you said the whole family would be there. Aunts, uncles, cousins." "Well, immediate family," Michael clarified, his voice taking on a slightly defensive tone. "Mom, Dad, maybe Uncle Tom since he has connections in finance. It's really more about business development than celebration." I sat in silence, processing what I was hearing. The dinner I had been looking forward to, the family celebration I had cleared my calendar for, apparently didn't include me. I wasn't immediate family in this context. I wasn't connected to finance, in a way that made my presence valuable for Michael's networking objective. "I see," I said finally, not trusting myself to say more. "You understand, right? It's not personal, it's just strategic. Dad thinks it's important to maximize these kinds of opportunities. Not personal." The phrase echoed in my mind as I ended the call with some excuse about having another meeting. I sat in my office, staring at my calendar where I had blocked out Saturday evening for Michael's promotion dinner, and felt a familiar but more intense version of the disappointment I had experienced countless times throughout my life.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But this time was different. This wasn't about unequal praise or diminished recognition.
This was about being explicitly excluded from a family event because my professional success didn't align with my brother's networking goals. I wasn't just being overlooked, I was being actively left out because my presence wasn't seen as beneficial to Michael's career advancement. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not just angry at Michael, though his casual dismissal stung, but angry at myself for continuing to expect different treatment from a family that had consistently demonstrated their priorities. I was angry at the years I had spent hoping for recognition that would never come, accommodating dynamics that diminished my achievements, and accepting a role in my family that required me to be smaller so others could appear larger. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I researched Goldman Hartwell extensively. I looked up their senior leadership, recent news articles, company performance, and strategic initiatives. What I discovered was interesting and relevant to my work in a way that gave me an idea. Goldman Hartwell was facing some significant challenges. The wealth management industry was becoming increasingly competitive, with larger firms acquiring smaller ones and technology platforms disrupting traditional models. The company had been losing market share and struggling to attract younger clients who preferred digital-first approaches to wealth management. More interestingly, I discovered that Goldman Hartwell's parent company had recently hired a new CEO who was focused on operational efficiency and organizational restructuring, the kind of work that was my specialty, the kind of work that companies paid my firm substantial fees to implement. As I read through industry reports and company analysis, an idea began to form. It was bold, potentially risky, and definitely unconventional. But it was also the kind of strategic thinking that had built my consulting business and earned recognition from clients across multiple industries. I spent Friday developing what I would later call my contingency plan. I researched key personnel at Goldman Hartwell, identified strategic challenges the company was facing, and prepared a preliminary analysis of organizational inefficiencies that I could identify from publicly available information. By Friday evening, I had drafted a letter that was professional, strategic, and designed to create opportunity from exclusion. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that makes Denver beautiful. I woke up early, went for a run, and spent the morning working on client projects. I had no plans for the evening, no family dinner to attend, no celebration to participate in. For the first time in 3 weeks, my Saturday night was completely open. Around noon, I decided to call my parents. Not to complain about being excluded, not to create drama, but to wish Michael well and confirm what I already suspected about the family dynamics that had led to this situation. "Hi Mom," I said when she answered. I wanted to call and wish Michael good luck at his dinner tonight. "Oh Sarah, how thoughtful," she replied, but I could hear the slight tension in her voice. "He's so nervous," well, excited but nervous. "Your father has been giving him advice all morning. It sounds like it's going to be a wonderful evening," I said. Very strategic of Dad to suggest making it a business networking event. Mom was quiet for a moment. "Yes, well, your father thought it would be smart to invite some of Michael's colleagues and clients. Make it serve double duty, you know." "Absolutely," I agreed. "That makes perfect sense. Who's attending from the company?" As Mom listed names, I recognized several from my research. Senior partners, key clients, even the regional director who would likely have input on Michael's future advancement at the firm. It was indeed a strategic guest list that could significantly benefit Michael's career trajectory. "It sounds like Michael is really thinking ahead," I said. "Very smart approach. Your father is so proud," Mom continued. "He keeps saying this is just the beginning for Michael, that this promotion opens up so many doors." After I hung up with Mom, I sat in my office and made the phone call that would change everything. I looked up the direct number for Goldman Hartwell's main office and asked to be connected to the office of James Patterson, the senior managing director who, according to my research, would be attending Michael's dinner that evening. "Mr. Patterson's office, this is Angela." "Hi Angela, this is Sarah Mitchell from Mitchell Strategic Consulting. I was hoping to speak with Mr. Patterson briefly about a potential collaboration opportunity. Mr. Patterson is preparing to leave for an engagement this evening, but he might have a few minutes. May I ask what this is regarding?" I took a deep breath. This was the moment where my plan would either create the opportunity I hoped for or backfire spectacularly. I'm calling to congratulate him on Michael Mitchell's promotion to Senior Vice President. I understand Michael is being honored at a dinner tonight, and I wanted to discuss some strategic opportunities that might interest Goldman Hartwell. There was a pause. Are you related to Michael Mitchell? Yes, he's my brother, but I'm calling in my professional capacity. I've been following Goldman Hartwell's recent strategic initiatives, and I believe there may be some synergies worth exploring. Hold please. As I waited, my heart pounded with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This was either brilliant or completely insane, and I wouldn't know which until Mr. Patterson either took the call or politely declined. Sarah Mitchell, this is James Patterson. His voice was warm but businesslike, exactly what I had expected from someone in his position. Patterson, thank you for taking my call. I wanted to congratulate you on recognizing Michael's contributions with his promotion to Senior VP. He's spoken very highly of his experience at Goldman Hartwell and the leadership opportunities you've provided him. Michael is a valuable member of our team, he replied, though I could hear curiosity in his voice about where this conversation was headed. I'm sure he is, I continued. The reason I'm calling is that in my research about Goldman Hartwell's strategic initiatives, I've identified some interesting opportunities where my consulting firm might be able to add value. I specialize in organizational efficiency and restructuring, and I've been following your parent company's focus on operational optimization. Now I had his attention. What kind of opportunities? For the next 10 minutes, I outlined my preliminary analysis of Goldman Hartwell's operational structure, identified 3 specific areas where efficiency improvements could increase profitability, and described similar projects I had completed for other financial services firms. I was careful to be professional, knowledgeable, and respectful while demonstrating expertise that was clearly relevant to their business challenges. This is very interesting, Mr. Patterson said when I finished. I had no idea Michael's sister was in consulting, much less specialized in our exact areas of concern. Michael is focused on client-facing work, I said diplomatically. We don't often have occasion to discuss operational strategy in our family conversations. Would you be able to put together a more detailed proposal? I'd be interested in seeing your specific recommendations for our situation. My heart skipped. This was better than I had hoped for. Absolutely. When would be most convenient for you to review it? Next week sometime. I'll have my assistant Angela reach out to schedule a meeting. As we wrapped up the call, Mr. Patterson said something that made my strategic gamble feel completely worthwhile. I'm looking forward to discussing this with Michael tonight. He'll be so pleased to know his sister is already thinking about ways to support Goldman Hartwell's success. After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and smiled. The family dinner that had excluded me because I wasn't relevant to Michael's professional networking was about to become very interesting indeed. I had turned exclusion into opportunity, and the evening that was supposed to celebrate Michael's achievement was about to showcase mine as well. The irony wasn't lost on me. By being left out of Michael's celebration, I had created my own invitation to his professional world. And unlike his promotion, which was the result of steady progression within an existing structure, my invitation was the result of initiative, strategic thinking, and the kind of business development skills that create lasting professional relationships. I spent the rest of Saturday afternoon preparing for what I suspected would be a very different Sunday morning conversation with my family. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of quiet that precedes a storm. I woke up feeling energized rather than disappointed, which was unusual for me after a family slight. Usually these situations left me drained and questioning myself. This time I felt like I had finally taken control of a narrative that had been written for me my entire life. I made coffee and settled into my home office to prepare for what I anticipated would be an interesting day. My phone had been unusually quiet, which seemed odd given that Michael's celebration dinner had taken place the night before. Typically, Mom would have called by now with a detailed recap of the evening, complete with descriptions of what everyone wore, what they ordered, and every compliment Michael received. The silence felt significant. Either the dinner had been unremarkable, which seemed unlikely given the guest list, or something had happened that required processing before family communication resumed. I suspected the latter, and I was right. At 9:47 a.m., my phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen, and I could tell from the abrupt timing that this wasn't a casual Sunday morning check-in. I let it ring 3 times before answering, wanting to project calm confidence rather than eager curiosity. "Good morning, Michael," I said, my voice neutral and pleasant. "Sarah." His voice was tight, controlled in a way that suggested he was working hard to manage his emotions. "We need to talk." "Of course. How was your dinner last night?" There was a long pause, and I could almost hear him deciding how much to reveal, and how to frame what had clearly been an unexpected turn of events. "It was interesting, very interesting, thanks to you." I waited, letting the silence stretch until he was forced to continue. "James Patterson spent a considerable portion of the evening asking about my sister's consulting firm and her ideas for operational improvements at Goldman Hartwell. Apparently you called his office yesterday." "I did," I confirmed, offering no additional explanation or justification. "Sarah, what were you thinking? This was my promotion celebration, my networking opportunity, and you inserted yourself into my professional relationships without even asking." His tone carried the familiar mixture of frustration and entitlement that had characterized our interactions for years. The assumption that my professional activities required his permission, that my expertise was somehow secondary to his networking objectives, triggered a response I had been building toward for 3 decades. "Actually, Michael, I was thinking about business development. Something I'm quite good at, as it turns out." James Patterson was impressed enough with my preliminary analysis to request a full proposal. "That's not the point," he said, his voice rising slightly. "You went behind my back to contact my boss about business that had nothing to do with you." "Your boss, who is now potentially my client," I corrected. "And business that has everything to do with me, since organizational efficiency is literally my area of expertise." I could hear him taking a deep breath, clearly trying to regain control of the conversation. When he spoke again, his tone was more measured but still condescending. "Sarah, I understand you're upset about not being invited to the dinner, but this isn't the way to handle family disagreements. You've put me in an awkward position with my colleagues." The casual dismissal of my exclusion as a minor family disagreement crystallized everything I had been feeling. This wasn't about hurt feelings or sibling rivalry. This was about a fundamental disrespect for my professional capabilities, and a pattern of minimizing my achievements that had persisted for far too long. "Michael, let me be very clear about something. I wasn't acting out of hurt feelings or attempting to create drama. I made a strategic business decision based on my professional expertise and market analysis. The fact that it happened to intersect with your promotion celebration is coincidental." "Coincidental?" His voice carried disbelief. "You called my boss the day of my promotion dinner, and you expect me to believe that was coincidence. I expect you to understand the difference between emotional reaction and professional opportunity. Goldman Hartwell has operational challenges that align with my consulting expertise. James Patterson is the decision maker who can authorize the kind of engagement my firm specializes in." The timing was strategic, not emotional. There was another long pause, and I could sense Michael struggling with the realization that my actions had been calculated and professional, rather than impulsive and personal. In his worldview, my professional success was supposed to be separate from and subordinate to his career advancement. The idea that I might leverage family connections for business development the same way he routinely did had apparently never occurred to him. "Dad wants to talk to you," he said finally. "He's not happy about this situation." "I'm sure he's not," I replied. "Having his assumptions challenged rarely makes Dad happy, but I'm available to discuss my business decisions with him if he'd like." After Michael hung up, I spent some time thinking about the conversation and what it revealed about our family dynamics. Michael's primary concern wasn't that I had potentially overstepped professionally, but that I had acted independently without considering the impact on his position. Dad's reported unhappiness likely stemmed from the same source: a disruption of the established family hierarchy where my role was to support Michael's ambitions rather than pursue my own parallel interests. The phone rang again, 30 minutes later. This time it was Dad, and his tone was significantly less controlled than Michael's had been. "Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, what exactly did you think you were doing calling James Patterson yesterday?" The use of my full name was a throwback to childhood discipline, designed to establish his parental authority and my subordinate position in this conversation. It was exactly the kind of outdated power dynamic I was no longer willing to accept. Hello, Dad. I was conducting business development for my consulting firm. James Patterson expressed interest in my services, and we're scheduled to meet this week to discuss a potential engagement. Don't be cute with me, Sarah. You know exactly what you did. You deliberately undermined Michael's networking event by inserting yourself into his professional relationships. I sat back in my chair, recognizing this as a defining moment in my relationship with my father. I could respond with the deference he expected, apologize for disrupting family harmony, and return to my prescribed role as Michael's supporting cast member. Or I could stand up for my professional integrity and demand to be treated as an equal adult with legitimate business interests. Dad, with all due respect, I didn't undermine anything. I identified a business opportunity and pursued it professionally. The fact that it happened to involve someone from Michael's company doesn't make it inappropriate or illegitimate. You embarrassed your brother in front of his colleagues, Dad continued, his voice getting louder. This was his moment to shine, and you turned it into a conversation about your consulting business. Actually, according to Michael, James Patterson was impressed with my analysis and interested in my recommendations. If anything, having a sister with relevant expertise reflects well on Michael's family background and professional network. That's not how it works, Sarah, and you know it. Family members don't compete with each other professionally, they support each other's advancement. This statement encapsulated everything that had been wrong with our family dynamic for as long as I could remember. The assumption that my professional success was inherently competitive with Michael's, that supporting his advancement required diminishing my own capabilities, that family loyalty meant accepting a subordinate role regardless of my qualifications or achievements. Dad, I'm not competing with Michael. We work in completely different areas of finance. His expertise is in wealth management and client relations. Mine is in organizational efficiency and operational restructuring. There's no conflict between our professional activities. There's a conflict when you call his boss without his knowledge and try to insert yourself into his workplace. I called a potential client about a legitimate business opportunity. The fact that this person happens to work with Michael doesn't give Michael veto power over my professional decisions. Dad was quiet for a moment, and I could tell he was recalibrating his approach. When he spoke again, his tone was less angry but more disappointed, which in the Mitchell family hierarchy was actually worse than anger. Sarah, I don't understand what's happened to you. You used to be so supportive of your brother, so focused on family harmony. Now you're creating conflict where none needs to exist. The manipulation was subtle but familiar. Dad was reframing my professional independence as a character flaw, my refusal to subordinate my career to Michael's as evidence that I had somehow lost my way morally. It was the same technique he had used throughout my childhood to maintain family dynamics that served Michael's interests at the expense of my own. Dad, I'm the same person I've always been. I'm ambitious, professional, and capable of making strategic business decisions. The difference is that I'm no longer willing to hide those qualities to make other people more comfortable. This isn't about hiding anything, Sarah. It's about family loyalty and appropriate boundaries. What boundaries exactly? The boundary that says I can't pursue clients in the finance industry because Michael works in finance. The boundary that says my professional expertise is somehow less legitimate than his. The boundary that requires me to clear my business decisions with my brother before acting on them. Dad didn't answer immediately, which told me he was beginning to recognize the unreasonableness of his position. The boundaries he was referring to weren't professional standards or ethical guidelines. They were family rules designed to maintain a hierarchy that elevated Michael's career above my own. Your mother is very upset about this, he said finally, switching tactics to emotional manipulation. She's worried about the family dynamic and what this kind of conflict does to all of us. What conflict, Dad? I made a business call and generated a potential client relationship. The only conflict exists in your interpretation of that action as somehow inappropriate or disloyal. You know what you did, Sarah. You can justify it however you want, but you know this was about getting back at Michael for not inviting you to his dinner. This accusation struck closer to home, partly because there was an element of truth to it. My decision to call James Patterson had been strategically timed and emotionally motivated, even if it was also professionally legitimate. But Dad's framing of it as purely vindictive ignored the substantial business rationale behind my actions. "Dad, if I wanted to get back at Michael, I could have done things that were actually harmful to his professional reputation. Instead, I pursued a business opportunity that, if successful, will benefit both Goldman Hartwell and my consulting firm. The timing may have been influenced by the dinner situation, but the substance is entirely professional. James Patterson told Michael you knew details about the company's operational challenges that weren't public information. How did you get access to internal data about Goldman Hartwell?" This question revealed something interesting. Dad was moving from emotional arguments to more substantive concerns about my research methodology. It suggested that James Patterson had been more impressed with my analysis than Michael had initially revealed, and that my preliminary recommendations had been specific enough to prompt questions about my information sources. Everything I discussed with James Patterson was based on publicly available information. Annual reports, industry analysis, news articles, and regulatory filings. The same kind of research any competent consultant would conduct before approaching a potential client. But you knew about specific operational inefficiencies that suggested inside knowledge. "Dad, I've been analyzing organizational structures for 6 years. I can identify typical inefficiencies in any company based on their size, industry, and publicly reported metrics. It's pattern recognition based on professional expertise, not inside information." I could hear Dad processing this explanation, and I sensed his frustration at being unable to find a legitimate professional criticism of my actions. The conversation was revealing the difference between his assumptions about my capabilities and the reality of what I had accomplished in my consulting career. "Well, regardless of how you got the information, Michael is concerned about how this affects his position at the company. Having a family member involved in operational consulting could create conflicts of interest." This was a more sophisticated argument, and one that deserved a thoughtful response. If Goldman Hartwell hired my firm, there could indeed be situations where my recommendations might affect Michael's department or responsibilities. But such concerns were manageable through proper professional protocols, and they certainly didn't justify excluding me from potential business opportunities. "Dad, conflicts of interest can be managed through disclosure and appropriate boundaries. If Goldman Hartwell decides to engage my firm, we'll establish clear protocols to ensure that any recommendations affecting Michael's department are reviewed by independent parties. These kinds of situations occur regularly in consulting, and there are standard practices for managing them. Michael doesn't want to work for a company where his sister is conducting operational reviews that could affect his job security. Then Michael should focus on performing his job at a level that makes operational reviews irrelevant to his position. Senior vice presidents who add value to their organizations don't need to worry about efficiency consultants." The harshness of this statement surprised even me, but it reflected something I had been thinking for years. Michael's anxiety about my potential involvement in Goldman Hartwell's operational assessment suggested he wasn't as confident in his professional performance as his promotion would indicate. "Sarah, that's a terrible thing to say about your brother." "Dad, it's a realistic assessment based on professional standards. If Michael is truly adding value in his new role, then operational improvements should enhance his effectiveness rather than threaten his position. His concern suggests he's not as secure in his performance as he should be, or it suggests he's uncomfortable having his sister evaluate his workplace performance, which any reasonable person would understand." This was a fair point and one I was prepared to address. "Dad, if Goldman Hartwell hires my firm, I wouldn't be evaluating Michael's individual performance. I'd be analyzing organizational structures, process flows, and resource allocation patterns. My focus would be on systems and procedures, not personnel assessment. But your recommendations could affect Michael's department, his responsibilities, his advancement opportunities. They could, and if my analysis identifies ways to make Michael's department more efficient or effective, that would actually benefit his career prospects. Operational improvements typically enhance the performance of competent employees rather than threatening their positions." Dad was quiet again, and I could sense him running out of reasonable objections to my potential engagement with Goldman Hartwell. The conversation was shifting from emotional manipulation to practical concerns. which was progress of sorts. Your mother wants the family to have dinner together this week. She thinks we need to discuss this situation as a family and find a way to move forward that doesn't create ongoing conflict. I almost laughed at the predictability of this suggestion. Mom's solution to family dysfunction was invariably to gather everyone around the dinner table and attempt to restore harmony through collective conversation and emotional pressure. It had never worked in the past, and it certainly wouldn't work now when the fundamental issue was respect for my professional autonomy. Dad, I'm happy to have dinner with the family, but I'm not going to apologize for pursuing legitimate business opportunities or agree to restrict my professional activities to accommodate Michael's comfort level. No one's asking you to apologize, Sarah. We just want to understand your perspective and find a way to handle these situations better in the future. My perspective is simple. I'm a successful business owner with expertise that's valuable to companies like Goldman Hartwell. When I identify opportunities to serve potential clients, I'm going to pursue them professionally and strategically. The fact that one of those clients happens to employ my brother doesn't change my approach or my obligations to my business. And if that creates uncomfortable situations for Michael, then Michael will need to develop the professional maturity to manage those situations appropriately.
Having successful family members in related industries isn't uncommon in business, and there are established ways to handle potential complications. After Dad hung up, I spent the rest of Sunday preparing for my meeting with James Patterson. I researched Goldman Hartwell's organizational structure more thoroughly, identified specific efficiency opportunities, and developed preliminary recommendations that would demonstrate the value my firm could provide. The work was intellectually engaging and professionally satisfying in ways that went beyond the family drama that had precipitated it. This was what I did best: analyzing complex organizational challenges and developing solutions that improved performance while reducing costs. The fact that it was happening in Michael's workplace added an element of personal satisfaction, but the professional substance was entirely legitimate. Monday morning brought an email from James Patterson's assistant confirming our meeting for Wednesday afternoon. The email was professional and straightforward, with no indication that there were any concerns about my relationship to Michael or questions about potential conflicts of interest. I spent Monday and Tuesday refining my analysis and preparing presentation materials that would showcase my firm's capabilities. By Tuesday evening, I had developed a comprehensive proposal that identified 3 major efficiency opportunities within Goldman Hartwell's current structure and outlined implementation strategies that could save the company approximately $1.2 million annually. The proposal was some of my best work, combining thorough research with practical recommendations that addressed real operational challenges. It was the kind of analysis that had built my reputation in the consulting industry and attracted clients who valued strategic thinking over conventional solutions. Tuesday evening, Mom called. Her tone was careful and diplomatic, the voice she used when attempting to manage family conflicts without taking sides. "Sarah, honey, I heard about your meeting with Michael's colleague on Wednesday." "My meeting with a potential client," I corrected gently. "Yes, of course. I just wanted to check in and see how you're feeling about everything. This whole situation has been so stressful for the family." Mom's approach was subtler than Dad's direct confrontation or Michael's wounded entitlement, but it was equally manipulative. She was framing my professional activities as a source of family stress that I was responsible for managing and resolving. "Mom, I'm feeling confident about the meeting. I've prepared a strong proposal that addresses some real challenges Goldman Hartwell is facing. If they decide to hire my firm, it will be a significant win for my business." "That's wonderful, dear. I'm sure you've done excellent work, as always. I just worry about the family dynamics and how this affects Michael's position at work." "Mom, Michael's position at work should be based on his performance and contribution to the company, not on whether his sister has business relationships with his employer. If anything, having a family member with relevant expertise reflects well on his professional network." "I know you're right, intellectually. It's just hard for me to see conflict between my children, especially when it involves their careers." This was Mom's classic approach to family management, acknowledging the logic of my position while emphasizing the emotional cost of maintaining it. She wasn't arguing that I was wrong, just that being right was causing pain for people she loved. "Mom, the only conflict here is other people's discomfort with my professional independence. I'm not creating problems for Michael. I'm pursuing opportunities for my business. Those are completely different things. I know, sweetie, your father and I are both proud of what you've built with your consulting firm. We just wish there was a way to do it that didn't create tension within the family. There is a way, Mom. Everyone could treat my professional activities as legitimate business decisions rather than personal attacks on Michael's career. Everyone could celebrate the fact that both of your children have found success in related fields rather than treating that as some kind of competition. You're absolutely right, Sarah, and I think that's what we're all working toward. It's just taking some adjustment for everyone to figure out how to handle these new dynamics. Mom's response was more encouraging than Dad's anger or Michael's defensiveness, but it still framed the situation as something I needed to be patient with rather than something that required immediate change from other family members. Wednesday morning arrived with unseasonably warm weather and the kind of clear sky that made Denver's mountain views spectacular. I dressed carefully for my meeting with James Patterson, choosing a navy blue suit that projected competence and authority without being intimidating. Mitchell Strategic Consulting had developed a reputation for professionalism and strategic thinking, and I wanted my appearance to reinforce those qualities. This wasn't just about landing a new client, though that was certainly important. This was about demonstrating that my exclusion from Michael's networking dinner had been their loss, not mine. I arrived at Goldman Hartwell's downtown offices 15 minutes early, using the time to observe the building's layout and get a sense of the company's operational efficiency from a visitor's perspective. The reception area was well designed, but showed signs of outdated technology integration and inefficient space utilization, both of which aligned with my preliminary analysis. James Patterson greeted me personally, which was unusual for senior executives, and suggested he was taking this meeting more seriously than a typical vendor presentation. He was tall, probably in his mid-50s, with the kind of presence that commanded attention in business settings. Sarah, thank you for coming in. I have to admit, I'm curious to hear more about your ideas after our phone conversation on Saturday. Thank you for making time to meet with me, James. I'm excited to share what I've discovered about Goldman Hartwell's operational opportunities. He led me to a conference room with windows overlooking downtown Denver and the mountains beyond. The setting was impressive, but I noticed inefficiencies in the office layout and technology systems that reinforced my preliminary assessment of the company's organizational challenges. Before we begin, James said, I want to address the elephant in the room. Michael mentioned that you're his sister, and I want to make sure we're both comfortable with any potential complications that might create. I had anticipated this conversation and was prepared with a professional response that would address his concerns without diminishing the value of my services. James, I appreciate you bringing that up directly. Family relationships in business can create complications, but they can also provide valuable insights and long-term stability. If Goldman Hartwell decides to engage my firm, I would recommend establishing clear protocols to manage any potential conflicts of interest, including independent review of any recommendations that might affect Michael's department. That seems reasonable. Michael spoke very highly of your professional reputation, by the way. He mentioned your feature in Forbes and your work with major clients. This was interesting and suggested that Michael's private assessment of my capabilities was more positive than his public defensiveness would indicate. It also meant that James Patterson had additional validation for my credentials beyond our initial phone conversation. I'm fortunate to work with clients who value strategic thinking and operational excellence. The projects I've been involved with have taught me to identify efficiency opportunities that many organizations overlook. Tell me about your analysis of Goldman Hartwell. What did you discover in your research? For the next 45 minutes, I walked James Patterson through my assessment of his company's operational structure, identifying specific inefficiencies and outlining implementation strategies for addressing them. His questions were sophisticated and demonstrated a thorough understanding of the challenges I was addressing. The presentation went better than I had hoped. James was engaged, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely impressed with the depth of my analysis and the practicality of my recommendations. By the end of our meeting, we were discussing implementation timelines and fee structures rather than whether Goldman Hartwell was interested in my services. Sarah, this is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need. Our parent company has been pushing for operational improvements, but we haven't had the internal expertise to identify the most impactful opportunities. Your analysis addresses several issues we've been struggling with. I'm confident my firm can deliver measurable results, James. The efficiency improvements I've outlined should pay for themselves within 6 months, and the long-term benefits will be substantial. I'd like to move forward with a preliminary engagement. Something focused on the technology integration challenges you identified, which seem to offer the most immediate return on investment. We spent another 15 minutes discussing contract terms and project scope. By the time I left Goldman Hartwell's offices, I had secured a consulting engagement worth approximately $150,000, with the potential for additional projects based on the success of the initial work. As I walked back to my car, I felt a satisfaction that went beyond the financial value of the new client. I had turned exclusion from Michael's networking dinner into the largest consulting contract my firm had ever secured. More importantly, I had demonstrated that my professional capabilities were entirely independent of my family's recognition or support. The irony was perfect. Michael's celebration dinner, designed to advance his career through strategic networking, had inadvertently provided me with access to decision-makers I might never have encountered otherwise. His attempt to exclude me from his professional world had backfired spectacularly, creating opportunities for my business while forcing his colleagues to acknowledge my expertise. That evening, I called my parents to share the news of my new contract. Mom answered on the second ring, her voice carrying the mixture of hope and anxiety that had characterized all of our conversations since the weekend. "Sarah, how did your meeting go?" "Very well, Mom. Goldman Hartwell has hired my firm for a technology integration project. It's a substantial engagement that could lead to additional work if the initial results are strong." "Oh my goodness, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. What does this mean for Michael's situation at work?" "It means Michael works for a company that's smart enough to recognize valuable expertise when they see it. If anything, it should reflect well on his family background and professional network." "Have you spoken to Michael about this?" "Not yet. I'll call him later this week to let him know how things worked out. Your father will be so pleased to hear about your success. He's been worried about the family tension, but I think this news will help him understand your perspective better." After I hung up with Mom, I sat in my office reviewing the contract terms James Patterson and I had discussed. The project would begin in 2 weeks and would require me to spend considerable time at Goldman Hartwell's offices, conducting interviews with staff members and observing operational processes. There was a good chance I would interact with Michael during the course of my work, which would create exactly the kind of uncomfortable situation he had been worried about. But that was his problem to manage, not mine. I had legitimate work to do for a client who valued my expertise, and I wasn't going to modify my professional approach to accommodate his discomfort. Thursday morning brought a text message from Michael that was shorter and more direct than our usual communications. "Heard about your contract. We should talk." I waited until Thursday afternoon to call him back, partly because I was busy with other client work, and partly because I wanted to project the message that my schedule was full and his concerns weren't my highest priority. "Michael, I got your text. Congratulations are in order, I believe. My meeting with James Patterson went very well. Sarah, we need to establish some ground rules if you're going to be working at Goldman Hartwell." The presumption in his statement was remarkable. Michael was proposing to dictate terms for my professional engagement with his employer, as if my work required his permission or oversight. "Actually, Michael, Goldman Hartwell and I will establish whatever protocols are necessary to ensure a successful project. Your input on those arrangements isn't required or relevant. It's relevant because I work there, and having my sister conducting operational assessments creates a complicated situation for everyone involved. It creates a complicated situation for you specifically. Everyone else at Goldman Hartwell seems comfortable with the arrangement. Look, I'm not trying to interfere with your business. I'm just asking that you be mindful of how your work might affect my position and try to minimize any potential conflicts." This was a more reasonable request than his initial demand for ground rules, and it deserved a thoughtful response. I was willing to be considerate of Michael's position as long as he didn't try to impose restrictions on my professional activities. "Michael, I can promise you that I'll conduct my work professionally and avoid creating unnecessary complications for your department. But I can't promise to modify my recommendations or limit my analysis to protect your comfort level. If Goldman Hartwell has hired me to identify efficiency opportunities, that's what I'm going to do.
That's all I'm asking for, Sarah, just professional conduct that doesn't put me in an awkward position with my colleagues. Then we shouldn't have any problems. My work will speak for itself, and your work should speak for itself. As long as we're both performing at a high level, there's no reason for conflict. After our conversation ended, I realized that something had shifted in our dynamic. Michael was no longer demanding that I accommodate his preferences or limit my professional activities. He was acknowledging my right to pursue business opportunities while asking for consideration of his position. It wasn't complete acceptance of my professional independence, but it was progress. The following Monday, I began my work at Goldman Hartwell with a series of meetings designed to understand their current technology systems and integration challenges. James Patterson introduced me to key staff members as a consultant specializing in operational efficiency, without any mention of my relationship to Michael.
The work was fascinating and complex, requiring me to analyze everything from software systems to workflow processes to physical office layouts. Goldman Hartwell had grown rapidly over the past decade, and their technology infrastructure had developed in a piecemeal fashion that created significant inefficiencies. During my second week at the company, I encountered Michael in the elevator. It was the first time we had seen each other since the promotion dinner controversy, and the moment was potentially awkward for both of us. "How's the project going?" he asked, his tone neutral and professional. "Very well. Your colleagues have been helpful and cooperative. The technology integration challenges are substantial, but they're exactly the kind of problems my firm specializes in solving." "Good to hear." James Patterson mentioned you've identified some significant opportunities, several actually. The potential cost savings are larger than I initially anticipated. Michael nodded, and I could see him processing the implications of my work for his own position within the company. If my recommendations were implemented successfully, they would reflect well on Goldman Hartwell's decision to hire external expertise, which could benefit everyone involved. "Sarah, I owe you an apology for how I handled the dinner situation. I should have found a way to include you, especially given your professional background." This unexpected acknowledgement caught me off guard. Michael had never apologized for his treatment of me, even in situations where his behavior had been clearly inappropriate. "I appreciate that, Michael. The exclusion was hurtful, but it led to an opportunity I might not have pursued otherwise. You turned it into something positive, which is impressive. I'm not sure I would have handled a similar situation as professionally." The conversation was brief, but it marked a significant shift in our relationship. For the first time, Michael was acknowledging my professional capabilities and expressing respect for my strategic thinking. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was recognition that I had earned through my actions rather than requested through family dynamics. By the end of my third week at Goldman Hartwell, I had completed my analysis and was preparing final recommendations for James Patterson and the executive committee. The project had uncovered opportunities for cost savings and efficiency improvements that exceeded even my optimistic initial projections. More importantly, the work had demonstrated that my exclusion from Michael's promotion dinner had been a catalyst for professional advancement rather than a setback. I had transformed a family slight into a business opportunity, proving to myself and others that my success didn't depend on family recognition or inclusion in their networking activities. The final irony was that Michael's attempt to exclude me from his professional world had actually strengthened my position within it. His colleagues now knew me as a competent consultant who delivered valuable results, not just as Michael Mitchell's sister. I had earned my place at Goldman Hartwell through merit and expertise, which was far more satisfying than any invitation to a family dinner could have been. 6 months after completing the Goldman Hartwell project, I received an invitation that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. The envelope arrived on a Thursday morning, heavy cardstock with formal lettering that immediately caught my attention. Inside was an invitation to Goldman Hartwell's annual Partner Recognition Gala, specifically requesting my presence as a guest of honor for my contributions to the company's Operational Excellence Initiative. The timing was perfect. My consulting firm had grown substantially since landing the Goldman Hartwell contract, with 3 new employees and a waiting list of potential clients. The success of the technology integration project had generated referrals throughout Denver's financial sector, and I was now working with companies I had only dreamed of accessing a year ago. But more than professional success, I had achieved something more valuable: the respect of my family. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, and it certainly hadn't been without complicated moments, but the fundamental dynamic had shifted in ways that surprised everyone involved. The change became most apparent during our monthly family dinners, which had resumed after a brief hiatus following the promotion celebration drama. What had once been showcases for Michael's achievements had evolved into genuine conversations where both of our professional experiences were valued and discussed with equal interest. Dad had been the most surprising in his evolution. The man who had once dismissed my consulting work as unstable self-employment now regularly sought my advice about organizational challenges at his law firm. During our last conversation, he had admitted that watching my strategic thinking in action at Goldman Hartwell had given him a new appreciation for the complexity and value of what I did professionally. "I never understood the depth of analysis required for your work," he had said during a quiet moment after dinner. "I thought consulting was just giving obvious advice to companies too lazy to figure things out themselves. I was completely wrong about the expertise it requires." Mom had always been more supportive, but even she had gained a deeper understanding of my professional capabilities. She had started referring to my business accomplishments with the same pride she had previously reserved for Michael's promotions, and she frequently mentioned my successes to her friends in ways that made me feel genuinely valued. Michael's transformation had been the most complex, but also the most meaningful. The awkwardness of working in the same building had gradually given way to something resembling professional collaboration. He had started asking for my insights about Goldman Hartwell's strategic direction, and I had begun to see him as a competent wealth advisor, rather than just the golden child who had always received preferential treatment. The real breakthrough had come during the implementation phase of my technology recommendations. One of my suggestions had significantly improved the efficiency of client onboarding processes, which directly benefited Michael's department and made his job more effective. Instead of feeling threatened by my contributions, he had begun to see them as enhancing his own professional capabilities. "Having you work on that project was the best thing that could have happened to my career," he had told me recently. "The improvements you recommended made everyone in client services more productive, and the partners noticed. It's been a major factor in my performance reviews." This acknowledgement had meant more to me than any apology could have. Michael wasn't just recognizing my professional competence, he was crediting my work with contributing to his own success. It represented a complete reversal from the family dynamic that had defined our relationship for decades. The gala invitation represented external validation of this internal family transformation. Goldman Hartwell was publicly recognizing my contributions to their operational success, and they were doing so at their most prestigious annual event. It was exactly the kind of professional recognition that I had stopped hoping my family would understand or appreciate, except now they not only understood it but were genuinely proud of my achievement. I decided to attend the gala with confidence and enthusiasm, rather than the defensive posture that had characterized my professional interactions with family-adjacent events in the past. This wasn't about proving my worth or defending my capabilities. It was about celebrating genuine accomplishment and enjoying the recognition I had earned. The evening of the gala, I chose a black cocktail dress that projected elegance without being ostentatious. As I was getting ready, I reflected on how different this preparation felt from the anxiety I had experienced before Michael's promotion dinner. That night, I had been hoping to earn recognition and acceptance. Tonight I was simply planning to enjoy recognition I had already received. The gala was held at the Denver Art Museum, with its distinctive angular architecture providing a striking backdrop for the evening's festivities. As I walked through the reception area, I was greeted by colleagues and clients who knew me as a successful consultant, rather than as someone's sister trying to prove herself professionally. James Patterson approached me during the cocktail hour, accompanied by two senior partners I hadn't met previously. "Sarah, I'd like you to meet David Chen and Margaret Walsh from our executive committee. They've been following the results of your technology integration project with great interest." The conversation that followed was entirely about my professional work and its impact on Goldman Hartwell's operational efficiency. David and Margaret asked sophisticated questions about my methodology and expressed interest in potential future projects. It was the kind of substantive professional discussion I had always wanted to have with my family but had rarely experienced. The cost savings from Sarah's recommendations exceeded our most optimistic projections. Margaret told James. Her analysis identified inefficiencies we had been living with for years without realizing their impact on our bottom line. More importantly, David added, she provided implementation strategies that were practical and achievable. Many consultants identify problems without offering realistic solutions. Sarah delivered both. As I listened to these senior executives discuss my work, I felt a deep satisfaction that went beyond professional pride. This was the recognition I had been seeking my entire career, acknowledgement of my capabilities from people who understood the complexity and value of what I did. During dinner, I was seated at a table with other honored guests, including a technology executive whose company had provided some of the systems I had recommended for integration. The conversation was stimulating and wide-ranging, covering industry trends, technological innovations, and strategic planning approaches. Halfway through dinner, I noticed Michael at a table across the room. He was seated with other Goldman Hartwell wealth advisors, and when our eyes met, he smiled and raised his glass in a subtle toast. The gesture was small, but it represented something significant, his genuine happiness for my success, rather than competitive resentment or wounded pride. After dinner, James Patterson stood to make remarks recognizing various contributors to Goldman Hartwell's successful year. When he mentioned the Operational Excellence Initiative and specifically acknowledged my consulting firm's contributions, the applause was enthusiastic and sustained. I felt a warmth and pride that was entirely different from the validation-seeking behavior that had characterized my younger years. Sarah Mitchell's analysis and recommendations have saved Goldman Hartwell over $2 million annually while improving service quality and employee satisfaction, James announced. Her work represents exactly the kind of strategic thinking that positions companies for long-term success in competitive markets. The recognition was gratifying, but what struck me most was how comfortable I felt receiving it. There was no anxiety about whether I deserved the praise, no worry about how family members might react, no defensive preparation for criticism or dismissal. I had simply done excellent work and was being appropriately recognized for it. During the reception following dinner, Michael approached me with a smile that seemed genuinely warm rather than obligatory. Congratulations, Sarah, that was quite an acknowledgement from James and the executive committee. Thank you, it's been rewarding to see the project results exceed everyone's expectations. I wanted you to know that several of my colleagues have mentioned how impressive your analysis was. It's actually enhanced my reputation within the company to have a sister with your expertise. This comment represented a complete transformation from Michael's initial concern about my involvement in his workplace. Instead of seeing my professional capabilities as threatening to his position, he now viewed them as enhancing his own professional network and reputation. I'm glad the project worked out well for everyone involved, I replied. Including you. More than well, the efficiency improvements you recommended have made my job significantly easier, and the partners have noticed the improved performance in client services. I should have been supporting your involvement from the beginning instead of worrying about imaginary conflicts. As the evening wound down, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this point. A year ago I had been excluded from Michael's promotion dinner because my professional success wasn't seen as relevant to his networking objectives. Tonight I was being honored by his company for contributions that had benefited both the organization and his career. The transformation hadn't been easy or automatic. It had required me to stop seeking approval and start demanding recognition based on merit. It had forced my family to confront their assumptions about professional success and gender dynamics. Most importantly, it had taught me that my worth wasn't determined by other people's acknowledgement, even when that acknowledgement eventually came. Over the following months, my relationship with my family continued to evolve in positive directions. Dad started consulting with me about organizational challenges at his law firm, treating me as a professional peer rather than a daughter who needed career guidance. Mom began sharing my business accomplishments with her social circle, with the same enthusiasm she had always shown for Michael's achievements. Michael and I developed what could only be described as a genuine friendship for the first time in our adult lives. We had lunch regularly to discuss industry trends and professional challenges, and he had become one of my most reliable sources of referrals for potential clients in the financial sector. The most significant change was in my own perspective. I no longer measured my professional success against my family's recognition or approval. I had learned to find satisfaction in the work itself, in the results I delivered for clients, and in the respect I earned from colleagues and competitors in my industry. But perhaps the most rewarding outcome was that my family had learned to see me clearly for the first time.
Not as Michael's sister or as a daughter who needed guidance, but as a competent professional who had built something significant and valuable through skill, dedication, and strategic thinking. The promotion dinner that had excluded me had ultimately become the catalyst for earning recognition I never could have imagined. By refusing to accept exclusion and turning it into opportunity, I had created space for authentic relationships based on mutual respect rather than prescribed family roles. Sometimes the most painful rejections lead us exactly where we need to be. Michael's dismissal had forced me to stop seeking approval and start demonstrating excellence. The table I couldn't sit at had motivated me to build my own platform, one where everyone had earned their place through merit rather than birth order or gender expectations. Looking back, I realized that the invitation I never received had been far less important than the opportunities I created for myself. The recognition that mattered most came not from being included in family celebrations, but from being acknowledged by colleagues and clients who valued my expertise and trusted my judgment. The brother who once said this is invite only now regularly invited me to industry events and sought my professional advice. The parents who had dismissed my career ambitions now celebrated my achievements with genuine pride and understanding. But most importantly, I had learned that my worth was never dependent on anyone else's invitation or approval. I had built my own table, earned my own recognition, and created success that stood entirely on its own merits. The transformation had been challenging and sometimes painful, but it had led to something far more valuable than family harmony: authentic relationships based on mutual respect and genuine appreciation for each other's capabilities and contributions. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.